Welcome, brave soul. I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. Listen closely, because once you hear what I'm about to tell you, you may never set foot in the woods again. That's the hook I'll leave dangling before your mind, the thread that catches like a fishhook in the throat, because some truths are jagged things. And when they pierce, they never let go. Our story today begins at the edge of a campground that isn't listed on any map, though everyone swears they've seen signs pointing toward it. Sometimes it's a crooked wooden arrow painted red, other times a laminated flyer stapled to a telephone pole. But when you try to find it again in daylight, it's gone. Always gone. Only the people who stumble into it at night ever truly discover its existence. And once you find it, you don't leave unchanged. This place, these grounds, they breathe. Not in the way you or I breathe, but with a rhythm older than lungs, older than flesh. The soil itself inhales, exhales, shuddering beneath your boots. The trees lean in, their roots tangled like veins, pumping something darker than water. Those who camp there awaken to sounds they can't explain, voices they never invited, and eyes, always eyes glittering between the branches, watching, waiting. The night we begin with was no different. A group of friends, 6 in total, pulled up to what they thought was a small rustic campground they'd read about online. Only it wasn't. The gravel lot was unmarked, just a crescent-shaped clearing ringed by towering pines. The air smelled of damp leaves, coppery and thick, and there was a strange stillness, as though every cricket and frog had been muted at once. Their headlights cut through mist that curled unnaturally low to the ground, clinging to their legs when they stepped out. "Guess this is it," laughed Marcus, the self-appointed leader. He tried to sound confident, but his voice cracked, and the echo seemed to travel farther than it should have, bouncing back from the trees like something repeating him just half a beat too late. They set up camp. Tents staked into soft, spongy soil, a fire coaxed to life from damp wood that somehow burned too eagerly, flames rising tall and thin like reaching fingers. The crackling was odd, not comforting. It sounded like whispers, tiny syllables woven between the hiss of sap. By the time they sat in a circle, beer in hand, marshmallows skewered, the night had wrapped itself tightly around them. Darkness so complete it seemed to press against their skin. Only the fire lit their faces, carving them into sharp, mask-like shadows. The first encounter came with a voice. It was Rachel, the quiet one, who heard it first. She tilted her head suddenly, marshmallow forgotten, staring toward the thicket behind her tent. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The others shook their heads. But Rachel's face drained pale, her lips trembling. It said my name. They laughed, as friends do when unease bubbles too close to fear. "Probably Marcus messing with you," joked Liz, throwing a pine cone across the fire. But Marcus hadn't moved. His eyes were wide, darting toward the trees. The voice came again. All of them heard it this time. A breathy, disembodied murmur drifting out from the woods. Rachel. The sound was wrong. Too close yet too far. As if whispered into their ears, but carried on the wind at the same time. Rachel clutched her arms. "It knows me." And then silence. Unease settled over the group. The kind that doesn't fade, just deepens. They tried to laugh it off, but the air around the fire had changed, grown heavy, sticky, as though invisible webs were threading between them. Then came the smell. It crept in gradually, clinging to their nostrils, the sweet, rotten stench of decay. Not fresh rot, but old, ancient, soaked deep into soil. Liz gagged, covering her nose. "What the hell is that?" No one answered, because just beyond the circle of firelight, something moved. A shadow crossed between the trees. Tall. Elongated. Its limbs too long, its gait too slow. The fire bent toward it, as though drawn by breath. And for a flickering second, every flame stretched into the shape of reaching hands. Marcus stood, flashlight in hand. "Probably a deer," he muttered, though his voice betrayed him. When he clicked on the beam, it cut into the dark, illuminating trunks slick with moisture. Nothing moved. Nothing but fog curling around roots like smoke. But when he turned back toward camp, the fire had dimmed, reduced to coals without explanation. And standing on the other side of the circle, just beyond the glow, was a figure. It looked like a man. No, like several men stitched together. Its face was blurred, smeared like wet paint, features sliding unnaturally, eyes too many, mouths too wide. It watched them in silence. Then it was gone. Not vanished in smoke. Not melted away. Just not there anymore. As though it had never been. The friends tried to pretend nothing happened. Humans are good at that. turning terror into silence, swallowing fear until it curdles in the gut. But sleep did not come easy. Each tent became a coffin of thin fabric. Every sound outside, snap of twig, rustle of leaves, echoed magnified 100 times. For Marcus, sleep never arrived at all. He lay listening to something circling his tent. Heavy steps, dragging feet, and then, fingers brushing against the nylon, tracing his outline. He held his breath as the shape pressed in, something cold and sharp dragging along the surface, inches from his face. When he dared to open his eyes, he saw the faint impression of a hand. But not 5 fingers, 7. In another tent, Rachel dreamed of water. She was drowning in a lake, hands reaching from beneath the surface, pulling her down. But when she woke, her hair was damp. Her sleeping bag soaked as though she'd been submerged. She screamed, and the others rushed to unzip her tent. The smell of brine and algae filled the air. But the campground was miles from any body of water. And then came the apparitions. Liz was the first to see them. She had gone to relieve herself near the treeline when she noticed shapes glimmering between the trunks. Pale figures, translucent, swaying gently. They looked like campers, tents behind them, campfire smoke curling upward. A mirror image of their own group. But as she stepped closer, the figures turned their heads. Every single one in unison. Their faces were blank. Skin stretched smooth over bone. Yet their mouths moved, whispering without sound. Liz stumbled back. And in that moment, all the apparitions lifted their hands to their throats and dragged their nails down, peeling away strips of phantom flesh that fell like ribbons of smoke. She ran screaming. When the group gathered, the figures were gone. But in the dirt where Liz had stood was a single message, carved deep into the earth as though by unseen claws. You should not be here. The night dragged on. Hours stretched, minutes bled. The campground pulsed like a living organ, every shadow thicker, every whisper sharper. And yet, none of them left. Something about the grounds rooted them in place. Their cars, parked only a few feet away, seemed impossibly distant. When Marcus suggested leaving, his voice cracked, his throat dry, and every one of them realized the same thing. The keys were missing. They tore through bags, searched pockets, flipped sleeping bags inside out. Nothing. Until Rachel noticed something gleaming inside the fire pit. The keys, half buried in ash. She reached for them, but the fire roared to life, flames clawing upward, blistering her hand before she could touch metal. And from within those flames came voices. Dozens, hundreds, all screaming at once. Not words, just raw, ragged agony. The screams faded, but their echoes clung to the group's ears like cobwebs. They backed away from the fire pit, eyes wide, breathing ragged, and that was when they realized something crucial. The trees had moved. The once familiar clearing was no longer familiar at all. The arrangement of tents, the path back to the gravel lot, even the outline of the woods, all of it had shifted. The pines stood closer together now, their trunks packed tight, crowding in, watching. Liz spun in circles. We're trapped. They've boxed us in. No, Marcus muttered, panic thick in his throat. Trees don't move. They don't. But when he pressed his hand against one trunk, he felt it tremble beneath his touch. The bark pulsed faintly like flesh stretched over muscle. And from within came a sound, a slow, deliberate heartbeat. He yanked his hand away. The forest inhaled. A wave of cold swept over the group, extinguishing every lantern, every ember. The world plunged into suffocating blackness. Rachel lit her phone screen, its glow weak, trembling in her hands. We have to leave now. With the keys or not, we run. We can't stay. But before they could move, before they could even think about which way to run, a new sound crept in. Footsteps. Not one pair. Many. Crunching leaves. Snapping twigs. Circling them in the dark. The noise grew louder, closer, until it felt like dozens of unseen bodies moved just beyond reach. And then, the whispers returned. This time not just one voice. A chorus. All speaking in unison, overlapping, words just distinguishable. Stay. Please stay with us. The voices grew louder, shifting tone, becoming pleading, then mocking, then furious. Don't leave. Don't leave. We are still hungry. Marcus raised his flashlight and swept the beam around the clearing. And in that split second they saw them, dozens of figures standing between the trees. Campers. Or what had once been campers. Their clothes were torn, rotted, burned. Their faces were smeared shadows, features half erased as though memory itself had abandoned them. Some swayed limply, others twitched violently, but all stared directly at the group. Then the flashlight died. Screams broke out. The friends ran in different directions, crashing through brush, colliding with trees. Branches clawed their faces, roots caught their ankles. Rachel tripped, tumbling hard into the dirt. When she looked up, she was alone. The dark around her rippled like water, shapes shifting inside it. And from the shadows crawled a figure on all fours, its joints bending the wrong way. It opened its mouth and Rachel's voice came out. "Help me, Marcus. Please." She froze, throat locked, unable to scream. The thing crept closer, its limbs jerking unnaturally, and its face began to change, stretching, reshaping until it wore her own. A perfect duplicate. Rachel staggered back, tripping again. When she glanced behind, her friends emerged through the brush, Marcus, Liz, and the others. Relief surged, until she noticed their faces too. Every one of them wore her face. Her own wide eyes, her own trembling lips staring back at her. And then, all at once, every Rachel screamed. Meanwhile, Marcus had found himself stumbling toward the lake. Except, there was no lake. The campground wasn't near water. And yet, before him stretched a black mirror of still liquid, the surface glassy, reflecting stars that weren't in the sky above. He should have turned back. But something in the water called to him. A pull in his chest, magnetic, irresistible. He stepped closer, his boots sinking into mud that wasn't mud at all, soft, fleshy, warm. The surface rippled. A face appeared in the water. His own face. But pale, bloated, eyes swollen and weeping black fluid. The reflection opened its mouth and Marcus heard himself whisper, "Join me." The reflection's hands reached upward, breaching the surface, wet and cold, clawing at his wrists. Marcus screamed, wrenching free, stumbling backward, only to find he was no longer at the water's edge. He was standing in the center of the clearing again, the lake gone. But his wrists burned with phantom handprints, livid and raw. Liz's ordeal was different. She found herself back at the fire pit, though it was no longer filled with ash or flames. Instead, it was a pit of teeth. Hundreds, thousands of human teeth, slick with blood, clattering together like a rattlesnake's tail. The teeth began to grind upward, forming a shape, a jaw, then a skull, then an entire figure made from bone and enamel. It rose from the pit, towering over her, and in its hollow sockets burned fire. The creature leaned down, its voice grinding like gravel. "We ate before. We will eat again." It reached for her, but Liz bolted, her screams splintering the night. Hours blurred into one another. Or maybe it wasn't hours at all. Time fractured in the campground, bending and twisting, refusing to flow in a straight line. They found each other again, huddled in the center of the clearing, shivering, eyes wide. But something was wrong. There were only 5 of them. "Where's Rachel?" Liz whispered. Marcus glanced around, panic rising. She was just here. She was with us. But none of them remembered when she'd slipped away. None of them remembered the last time they'd seen her face. And the more they tried to recall, the more their minds blurred like static filling the gaps in memory. Then from the edge of the clearing came her voice. "I'm here." They turned. Rachel stood in the shadows, smiling faintly. But her smile was wrong. Too wide. Her teeth were too many, too sharp. "Rachel?" Liz asked, voice trembling. The figure tilted its head. And then it stepped into the firelight. Her skin was sloughing off in strips, revealing something slick and black beneath. Her eyes rolled loosely in their sockets, never focusing, always drifting. And when she opened her mouth, it was not her voice that emerged but a chorus of voices, layered and broken. "You cannot leave. Not now. Not ever." The ground beneath their feet quaked, splitting open in jagged cracks. From the fissures rose more voices, more screams, accompanied by skeletal hands clawing their way upward. The soil writhed, alive, birthing shapes that had no right to exist. The trees bent inward, their branches weaving into a canopy that sealed shut above them, trapping them beneath a dome of writhing wood. And then the fire pit erupted once more. But not with flames. With faces. Countless faces, stretching, screaming, melting into one another, each mouthing the same word, "Stay." The friends clung to each other, trembling, sobbing, choking on terror. And then silence. Total, absolute silence. The figures, the apparitions, the twisting earth, all gone. The fire pit was empty, the trees still. It was as though nothing had happened at all. But when they looked at each other, their hearts froze. Because they weren't the same anymore. Marcus's eyes had turned black, reflecting nothing. Liz's skin bore handprints across her throat, deep bruises in the shape of claws. One by one they realized each of them had changed. Slightly altered and marked. The campground had not let them leave untouched. And somewhere in the woods, Rachel, or the thing that had worn her shape, laughed. The laughter lingered, bouncing through the trees as if the forest itself mocked them. It wasn't just sound, it was a vibration that rattled bones, a cold shiver that reached marrow. Marcus staggered forward. "We need to go. Now." His voice was low, cracked, as if something had scraped his vocal cords raw. But where to? Every path from the clearing wound back on itself, loops twisting into loops. No matter which way they turned, they found themselves back at the fire pit. The ground was a labyrinth, alive and hungry, herding them like prey. Liz clutched her bruised throat, eyes wide, whispering over and over, "We're not supposed to be here. We're not supposed to be here." Her words melted into sobs. And then the fog rolled in. Thick, choking cold. It coiled around ankles, rose to knees, wrapped them waist deep until the clearing was nothing but a gray void. Shapes flickered in the mist. Faces, hands, limbs that slithered close and vanished when touched. From within the fog came voices. Not the whispers from before. These were familiar. Marcus heard his father, dead 10 years. "You should have saved me." Liz heard her childhood friend who vanished in high school. "Why did you leave me?" The others heard their own regrets, their own ghosts, their own guilt. The fog wasn't just mist, it was memory weaponized. One of the group, Ethan, trembling, broken, snapped. He ran blindly into the gray, screaming, "I'm not staying here. I won't." The fog swallowed him whole. The others called his name, but his voice cut short. No scream, no cry, just a wet tearing sound and then silence. When the mist thinned for a heartbeat, they saw what remained. A pile of skin, empty like a discarded costume. Hollow from the inside out. His eyes still blinked in the heap, but there was nothing human behind them anymore. The ground drank what was left. The survivors collapsed into silence. No one spoke. No one moved. They only listened, waiting for the next horror to unfold. It came quietly. A camp lantern flickered to life, though none of them had touched it. Then another and another, until a line of glowing beacons stretched into the trees like a trail. A path offered. The friends exchanged terrified looks. "It wants us to follow," Marcus whispered. Liz shook her head violently. "It's a trap." "Everything here is a trap," Marcus snapped back. "At least this one looks like a way out." And so, with dread thick in their throats, they followed. The lanterns led them deeper, deeper than they thought the woods could go. The air grew damp, rank with mildew and iron. Soon they heard the crackling of fire again, the distant murmur of voices. They emerged into another clearing, and froze. It was them. Another camp. Another fire. Another circle of friends sitting exactly as they had earlier that night. Same clothes. Same movements. Same laughter. The doubles didn't notice them at first, too caught up in their conversation. But then one by one their heads turned. Every duplicate looked directly at the originals, and smiled an evil dark smile. The imposters rose. Movements stiff puppet-like. Their faces began to unravel, peeling off like masks, revealing hollow sockets and jagged teeth beneath. The forest roared with sound. Whispers. Screams. Laughter. The ground trembled as though cheering. Marcus shouted, "Run!" They bolted, but no matter where they turned, the doppelgangers were there, multiplying, mirroring, surrounding. The air thickened, pressing in, the weight of 1,000 unseen bodies watching. Finally, they burst into one last clearing. And there it was. The gravel lot. Their cars. Freedom. They sprinted, sobbing, fumbling for doors. Liz's hands shook so violently she dropped the handle twice before wrenching it open. Marcus jammed the keys into the ignition, twisting, praying. The engine roared. For a breathless second, hope bloomed. They peeled down the gravel road, headlights slicing through black. The trees blurred past, the fog thinning. The nightmare fading. But then, the headlights illuminated a sign. "Welcome to Whispering Pines Campground." And there they were, back where they started. The car screeched to a halt, tires spitting gravel. They stared out the windshield in horror. The same clearing. The same trees. Their tents. Their fire pit. Only, someone was already there. Themselves again setting up camp and laughing. Unaware. They hadn't escaped. They'd looped. The forest had trapped them in its endless cycle. Liz broke first. She stumbled from the car, screaming, clawing at her own skin as if she could tear her way free. The others rushed to grab her, but the ground opened beneath her feet. Roots snapped upward, coiling around her legs, dragging her down. Her shrieks were swallowed by soil, muffled until nothing remained but disturbed earth. Marcus and the last two survivors collapsed into the dirt, hollow, defeated. Their breaths came in shallow, broken gasps. And then the forest spoke. Not whispers this time. Not echoes. A voice. One singular, ancient, resonant voice that filled the night like thunder. You are mine now. All who enter are mine. The ground surged, splitting into a gaping maw of roots and soil. From its depths rose countless faces, campers from decades past, their features twisted, their eyes pleading, their mouths screaming silently. Hands reached out, grabbing, clawing, dragging the survivors into the earth. No matter how they fought, no matter how they begged, the ground consumed them. Their screams echoed long into the night. And when the clearing was still again, when the soil was smooth and unbroken, the campground exhaled. By dawn it looked ordinary. A quiet lot. A circle of tents. A fire pit filled with cold ash. The birds sang. The crickets returned. And when a new group of travelers pulled in, weary from the road, eager for rest, they smiled with relief at the sight of a perfect little campground. They never noticed the faint voices carried on the breeze, faint but clear if you really listened. Whispers, desperate and eternal. Stay. Please stay with us. Thank you so much for sticking around until the end, it really means a lot. Please don't forget to leave a like. And if you want to hear more stories like these, then please consider subscribing and hit the bell while you're there. Thank you.
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts? Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare,